Now, during this time of affluence, you're going to have the population increase quite dramatically. This is known as the baby boom. You guys know the baby boom, right? The baby boomers born around that time. You got the population increasing by about 30 million people in the 1950s. That's pretty big, right? And this population growth pretty much continued into the mid 60s. Okay, so I mean, think about the environment. We just won World War II, right? The soldiers are coming home, the economy's doing good, babies are being born, right? They're being made, they're being born. It's happening. It's the baby boom, okay? And also during this time, women are going to get even more involved in the workforce, right? So you get women getting heavily involved in the workforce during World War II, but after the war, many lost their jobs as soldiers returned home. But by the mid 1950s, the number of female workers had increased beyond the number of female workers during World War II. Okay, but they still made less than men. Okay, about 60% of what men made at that time. So you still have unequal pay going on, even though you see an increase of women in the workforce. Okay. Also, during the 1950s, the feminist movement pretty much stagnated, wasn't really going anywhere, right? So, this is a time where if women were unhappy with their condition in society, right, it was viewed more as mental illness rather than a social issue that needed to be addressed, right? TV shows at the time in the 50s, shows like the 50s and 60s, like shows like Leave It to Beaver, right? They portray women as, dutiful wives, right? They take care of the home, take care of the kids. They may argue a little bit with their husband, pressure them a little bit, but ultimately they submit to the authority of their husband, right? There's just this whole image of conformity in the 1950s, right? And it's being portrayed by television, which is trying to show an image to the world, but also, to kind of, I guess you could say, condition families in America to show like, hey, this is what families are supposed to be like. Okay. Moving into this period of affluence in the 50s and 60s, housing segregation is still very common. Okay. The suburbs were predominantly inhabited by Anglo-Americans, right? 7 million Anglo-Americans had moved to the suburbs from urban areas, right, from the cities by the 1970s. Yeah, that's quite a lot of people, right? We talked before about how mortgages included clauses where you could not sell your house to someone that wasn't white. So when you buy your house, you have to sign this mortgage, and that means like once you sign it, when it comes time for you to sell in the future, you can't sell to someone who isn't white. And the federal government made it where you can only be eligible for public housing, like housing that's made by the government, the housing projects. You could only be eligible if you have a very low income. And so the projects were only built in non-white inner city areas due to the protests of people in white neighborhoods, which contributed ultimately to segregation and impoverished non-white neighborhoods in the inner cities. Okay, and so Anglo-Americans, they're protesting because, for one, most likely they're coming from a racist perspective, right? Racist ideology. They have this kind of idea that if non-whites were to move into their neighborhood, that would lower the property value of their houses. Like their houses wouldn't be worth as much anymore. So they would protest if they thought that public housing was going to be developed in their neighborhood. And so public housing is not going to be developed within Anglo-American suburban neighborhoods. It's going to be developed in the inner cities, right? Which contributes to impoverished neighborhoods, right? Or, ghettos. All right. Also, some cities would destroy poor urban neighborhoods in the cities so that they could renovate those areas, right? So they could build shopping centers, or maybe they're going to build a white neighborhood, right, a middle class neighborhood there in that part of the city, because they feel like, hey, this part of the city is good real estate, but you got all these poor non-white people living there, so we're going to kick them out, right? That kind of ideology from city officials. Okay, so they're basically pushing people of color out of the neighborhood and into segregated low income areas. Okay, so it's it's taking away people's rights to live where they want to live or where they can live. They're being segregated. Okay, and also at the same time you have some real estate companies who would play on the racist fears of some Anglo-Americans by spreading rumors that non-whites were about to start moving into their neighborhood. Okay, this is called blockbusting. Okay, and so why would real estate companies do this? Because it would motivate people to sell their homes at a lower price than what they were worth. And then the real estate company comes in and buys those homes for that lower price and then sells them at a higher price to non-whites to make a profit. Okay, so the real estate company is making a profit, and the neighborhood would eventually become a non-white neighborhood, and this is helping to reinforce segregation. Okay, instead of integrating the neighborhood where you have people of multiple races living in one neighborhood, you have these rumors being spread, Anglo-Americans moving out, and then that neighborhood becomes a non-white neighborhood, and at the same time the real estate companies are making a profit. Blockbusting.